Hello, my name is Miroslaw Babiarz, and today I want to talk about some advanced training techniques known as specialty methods. So these specialized protocols are designed to push your performance to the next level, improve your technique, and develop different types of strength. So here's the key point. They are not one-size-fits-all methods. They obviously need to be tailored to the athlete's needs, their experience level, and their individual goals. Why does this matter? Because even when you lift in the same percentage of your 1 rep max, let's say 70%, the way you perform the lift can change dramatically depending on the specialty method that you're using. For example, the speed at which you execute the lift can vary, which influences the training outcome, obviously. So that's why adjusting your speed to match your goals is so important. Whether you want to build strength, power, muscular endurance, your tempo, so the speed of each phase of the movement specifically should align with those objectives. So let's take a classic back squat as our example exercise. So it's a fundamental movement, but by applying different specialty methods, we can target different aspects of strength and performance. So these methods vary because they focus on time under tension, for example. They emphasize specific points of the movements and so on. So for instance, if we take techniques like a paused squat or inertia squat, when we start from the pins up, they're usually designed to increase the time under tension, to make the muscles more active, especially at critical points, sticking points like the bottom of the squat, for example, or the weak points. So these methods are great for acceleration, starting strength, and so on. Other methods such as accentuated eccentric loading or accommodating resistance, think eccentric hooks, bands, or chains, are aimed at improving speed strength or strength speed, depending on the ratio of free weight to the additional weight that comes from the hooks or bands and chains. And these techniques manipulate the load during different phases of the movement, whether it's eccentric or concentric. So the velocity, or how fast you perform a squat, plays a vital role in the type of strength you develop. So for example, if your goal is to develop absolute strength, you typically work at slower velocity. Conversely, if you want to develop reactive strength or power, you will focus on faster movement velocity. So this means as a coach or an athlete, understanding how to control and manipulate movement speed during each session is crucial. So for example, even if you want to work on hypertrophy, which is focused on muscle growth, you might intentionally slow down the movement eccentrically and concentrically to maximize muscle tension. So on the other hand, power focused phase, like I said, you should increase the velocity eccentrically, and then that way the concentric velocity can be higher as well. So depending on the goal, the method needs to be aligned with the speed, which needs to be aligned with the percentage of 1 rep. So before we dive deeper into this, it's important to understand that changing the training method usually affects the velocity of your lift, even if you're using the same percentage of your max. So that's one of the most important things. So different methods would generate different speeds at the same percentage of 1 rep. So squatting, if we look at squatting as an example, it involves 3 main phases. So we have the eccentric, the lower end phase. We have the transition, which could be a rapid stretch shortening cycle transition or a pause on the bottom. And then we have the concentric or the upward phase. So the speed on the concentric phase heavily depends on how you perform the eccentric and what happens in the transition phase. So if you slow down purposely the eccentric phase, meaning you take longer to lower the weight, you might actually decrease the concentric velocity. Conversely, if you shortened or modified the transition phase between the eccentric and concentric, like if you add a pause, or on the other hand, you utilize the stretch shortening cycle, that can either slow down the concentric velocity or speed up the concentric velocity. So how you perform each phase and how long it takes can drastically change the concentric velocity. So let's take a look at an example of two athletes. Let's say both have a maximum back squat of 200 kilograms and will take 70% of their 1 rep, which is about 140 kilograms. So athlete 1, for example, performs an eccentric phase in 6 seconds, then pauses on the bottom for 3 seconds, and then explodes up concentrically. Athlete 2, on the other hand, performs an eccentric phase in 1 to 2 seconds, doesn't pause, but instead uses a rapid stretch shortening cycle to explode up rapidly in a concentric phase. Now, which athlete do you think produces a higher concentric velocity? Without checking, without hooking up any equipment, I'll bet all my money on athlete number 2. So the quick eccentric and the use of the stretch reflex typically generate faster upward movement compared to the slow eccentric, pause on the bottom and then exploding up. So this example highlights why aligning your tempo with your training goal is so important. So if you're aiming for a specific velocity, for example, you're aiming at 0.75 meters per second at 70% of your max, you'll need to adjust your tempo accordingly. So for athlete 1, the one that did the 6-second eccentric, then paused for 3 seconds, to reach that speed at that percentage, you might need to lower the percentage to 50%. And then you can reach the 0.75 with the 6-second eccentric, the 3-second pause on the bottom, and then the concentric velocity can get to 0.75 probably, but you'll need to lower your 1 RM percentage that you're using for that specific specialty method. So when using different squat specialty methods and how they influence velocity, we need to understand that each method manipulates tempo, load, execution to target specific adaptations. So if you look at different parameters, for example, time under tension, this refers to the total amount of time your muscles spend actively working during each set. So it might seem straightforward, by understanding how methods influence time under tension can enhance your training effectiveness. So when you perform, for example, just 2 repetitions on these different methods, whether you pause and you're not pausing, you extend an eccentric, you're not extending the eccentric phase, and so on. So if you're doing just 2 repetitions, the time under tension between all these methods is probably not that different. The differences are usually minimal. But unless you're using like an extended eccentric, like you're doing like a 10-second eccentric, then obviously time under tension on that method will be longer. But things change drastically when you go up to 5, 6 repetitions and up. Then the differences between time under tension between the specialty methods can be very different. So for example, most athletes when lifting heavy weights without a strict tempo prescription tend to adopt like a natural rhythm. Typically they lower the weight in about 2 to 3 seconds, then explode up as fast as possible. Nobody pauses on the bottom on purpose, for example. And then they usually spend 2 to 3 seconds up top before descending again for another rep. Interestingly, many athletes do the pause up top without even thinking about it when the weight is heavy and the leverage is optimal. So they do like an intra-set rest period. This intra-set rest is actually proven to recruit more fast twitch motor fibers, enhance eccentric control, and improve technique. So something that we do instinctively with heavy weight is actually good for us. So as coaches and athletes, it's essential to be aware of these different tendencies athletes might have, because they directly influence time under tension. So that's why when designing a program, we should use the desired tempo. So we don't have the situation when one athlete performs 5 repetitions in a squat in 12 seconds and the other athlete performs 5 repetitions in 30 seconds. So the training effect for those 2 athletes could be vastly different. And clear tempo prescriptions help to ensure consistency and target specific adaptations we want to target for these athletes. If you want to read more about time under tension, I recommend you checking out great Travis Mash's article, Time Under Tension, Effective or a Myth. So when looking at, for example, if I do 5 repetitions again with these different methods, like I use a regular tempo and eccentric, I use a stretch shortening cycle, that might take about 13 seconds for me to do. But if I pause on the bottom for 2 to 3 seconds, that might take me over 20 seconds to do. If I do like a extended eccentric squat, that might take me 30 to 40 seconds to do 5 reps. But if I use bands or chains, which is fast eccentric, fast concentric, that might take me 10 or less seconds to do. So I understand that not time under tension is not the only variable out there, but you have to agree that 10 seconds and 40 seconds can target different adaptations, so at the same percentage and same amount of reps. So we have to be conscious of the time under tension, because this has to be aligned with other parameters. So, but I want to make this clear, no single parameter, whether it's reps, sets, tempo, intensity, is more important than the other. So focusing exclusively on one aspect often limits progress. So research shows that actually variations in sets, reps, velocity, and other variables can produce similar adaptations when properly balanced. So that's why it's so vital to integrate these elements thoughtfully. So think of it as a symphony. Each parameter plays a part, and when they work together, the training becomes much more effective. So things like repetitions, sets, tempo, time under tension, rest periods, intensity, movement velocity, exercise type, training method. Only by considering and adjusting all these factors, you can create an ideal training scenario to maximize your results. So, for example, lifting heavy weights at high intensity generally means fewer reps per set. Okay, there's an inverse relationship between those two. Fewer reps at higher intensity reduce total volume, but are effective for strength development. Also, high intensity lifts tend to move more slowly than low intensity lifts. So to compensate and still get enough stimulus with high intensity lifts, you often need to perform more sets. All these elements work together to create an environment that activates your high threshold motor units and 2x fibers most effectively. So this activation boosts your ability to generate maximal force, helping you strike the perfect balance between muscle tension and movement speed. So these are key factors for power, strength, and so on. So manipulating and understanding all these variables can tailor programs to achieve specific goals, whether it's hypertrophy, power, absolute strength. When you combine the right parameters thoughtfully, you set the stage for consistent progress and long-term success. Thank you very much for listening.